Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Cool Careers and How You Got Them. I'm your host, Zain Raza, and it's my job to help you explore your possible future career options with some less traditional professions and paths that you might not be aware of. I'm sure lots of adults ask you what you want to be when you grow up, and if you're anything like me, you don't have an answer for them. Hopefully, my podcast gives you some inspiration. I'm very excited and lucky to be joined today by Mr. Jesse Goldstein, who has a very cool and interesting career. He's dedicated his job to helping food and beverage suppliers with their brand identity. Mr. Goldstein's career allows him to work with a variety of different other companies, and he has the power to change the public's perception of them. And without further delay, let's get into it. Mr. Goldstein, how are you?
Doing great. How are you guys?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on the show today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so let's just get straight into it. We're going to start how we always do. What is your official title?
Well, I actually have a lot of titles, but I own a company in Nashville, Tennessee called Fresh. We're a creative studio company. We work, as you said, primarily with food and beverage. So it's restaurants, distilleries, products. And yeah, I'm creative director. I'm the CEO. I think my email signature says CEO slash creative director.
Can you tell us what exactly is a creative director? I'm sure we all know what a CEO is, but when someone says creative director, I don't really know what that means.
So it's really about ideas. One of the things that I think is really interesting. I'm sure we'll get into this, but so much of what I think makes us successful as a company is that while we're dealing with clients who are, they're opening a restaurant or they're scaling their business, is the fact that we have practical experience in that. I was a chef many moons ago, waited tables. I've seen so many different aspects of the industry and of the business that it's trying to come up with the ideas about how to apply it. And in our case, one of those things is just not dipping into that same well every time, not bringing the same idea to client to client to client. Not only is that not necessarily, I think, doing the best job that we could do, but I also don't want to screw somebody else over when I gave them a really good idea and then give that same idea to someone else. So, as a creative director, I'm working with our design team. I have an art director who then directs and kind of works with our graphic designers. We've got a photographer, videographer, copywriting, web, all of those sorts of things. And it's kind of big picture, if you will, as a creative director.
Okay, so you kind of have two different roles within the company. One is the
Mhm.
CEO and one is the creative director.
Correct. So half of my time is spent kind of managing the business, managing the team, managing our clients, and then the rest is kind of coming up with the ideas and collaborating. One of the most important values that I have here at the business, I call pushback, right? Which is, everyone's opinions matter. And that's, I think, what makes us better is not being precious about our own ideas and really encouraging that pushback. So it's a lot of collaboration. It's not just my ideas for sure.
Okay, that second part as a creative director sounds a little bit more fun and interesting than the CEO
Oh,
part.
for sure. For sure. Definitely.
Okay, so let's go a little bit back in time. When you were a teenager, what were you like?
So, as a teenager, I grew up in very rural North Carolina. My parents moved there from Philly from art school. And I was really fortunate, even though it's, super rural and you think about mountains of North Carolina, you think rednecks. But I grew up in a cooperative community of artists, bunch of hippies, basically. And so every day there was that sort of creative outlet for me, whether it was drawing, painting, weaving, playing with clay, stained glass blowers, just all of this incredible inspiration around me. And it was a really amazing place to grow up. And so I spent, all of my days doodling and drawing and, was one of those kids who just had a lot to kind of do. And I was in theater and I would act and I would write and I would draw and but at the same time, I was working in restaurants, waiting tables, through high school to make a little extra money, and and so it was. kind of wanting to find something that could be a creative outlet for me. I wanted to do something creative.
So
And
having all of those creative, sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, no, that's it.
Okay. So having all those creative outlets as a child, that kind of laid the foundation for the work that you want to do now, or that you are doing
Oh,
now, sorry.
100%. Whether it's kind of understanding the color theory, understanding this, it's all of those sorts of things that I think definitely help. And a lot of what we do, of course, is on computers, but right over here in the office, there's a whole area that's just the art table, right? It's markers and pens and paintbrushes. And sometimes I encourage the designers to get off the computer and do something the old fashioned way, do it by
Yeah,
hand.
that's great.
Yeah.
Um, so you had all of those creative outlets. You knew you wanted to do something in a creative space, but did you necessarily know what exactly you wanted to be when you grew up?
Of course not. I don't, and I think people who say they do at that age, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Um, but when I think about it now, what I'm doing now is really truly exactly what I would have dreamt of back then. I was interested in graphic design as a career path. I wanted to do something kind of artistic and creative, but I was also, this was quite a while ago. This was the 90s. Computers weren't as ubiquitous as they are now, but they were coming, right? And I saw that coming, and I was, without any computer experience myself back then, I was kind of scared of not being able to learn that and thinking that maybe that wasn't the path for me to go to school for graphic design. So I thought about, well, I want to get a job, right? And I grew up remembering my parents talking about paying off their student loans, and neither one of my parents did what they went to school for. They went to art school and they ended up in different careers. And so I thought, well, maybe I should do something that would just be a rewarding career. And I, there was a career day at school, and uh, there was a representative from a culinary school there in our high school cafeteria, and the guy was so obnoxious. He had clung on to a friend of mine, and I walked by, and she goes, "Oh, here, Jesse, talk to Jesse. He likes to cook." And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I was like, no matter where I end up, where I live, what I do, those skills of being a chef would pay off, right?
Hmm.
Every town, everywhere in the world, there's a restaurant that needs someone to cook. So
Right.
I thought about it from a job security standpoint, but I also thought about it as the kind of thing that throughout my life would be skills that I would enjoy, and that I could apply to my life outside of work. And and I was right. I loved it.
So
It
did
was
you cook a
great.
lot as a kid? Making breakfast, packing lunch?
Man, yeah. I mean, my both of my parents, growing up cooked a lot, and I spent a lot of time in the kitchen and always loved to cook. And love to eat actually, which I think probably came before the love of cooking. And but it was yeah, it was different. Like in high school, those last few I got senioritis my sophomore year, basically. You know what that's like. And and so I was just going, how's this ever really gonna apply? When am I gonna need trigonometry? When am I gonna ever use this and that? And I think, in a different career, those may have been skills I would need, but I've never had to draw back to them these days. And so it was something for me that it was practical, right? It was a really practical path of I'll do this and I'll figure out the rest later.
Okay. And so you did attend college.
Yeah, so I went to Johnson Wales University in Charleston, South Carolina. It's since moved to Charlotte, but I went there and I loved it, and and did really well. Yeah, I had a 4.0, graduated summa cum laude. It was an incredible thing where again, it was just every skill that I was learning, everything that I was learning made sense. It felt like knowledge that I could apply later. It felt like something that made, it wasn't wasted time. And so after that, I uh, they offered me an opportunity to work as a teaching assistant while I got my bachelor's degree in food service management. And so I was there. I had the culinary degree was just a 2-year associate's degree, and then I stayed on for 2 more years to build on top of that with a bachelor's in food service management. And I was, same thing, 4.0. I did excelled, did great in school, and they had an incredible career placement program, which I'm sure they still do, and was doing all these interviews, right? And I was going into interview after interview after interview, and it was suit and tie, suit and tie, suit and tie, which just isn't my style. It's not my speed. And I walked into this one room, and this guy was like kicked back, Birkenstocks, corduroys, all laid back. And I was like, okay, immediately I vibe with this, right? And his name was Tom Morales, and he had come to recruit in Charleston from here in Nashville, and he owned a company called Tomcats, and it was an on-location movie caterer.
It was a
And
what?
so,
Sorry.
on-location movie caterer. So,
On location. Okay.
right. So on movie sets, there's craft service, which you may hear about. You hear people talk about craft service. That's like all the snacks, right? The
Mhm.
catering folks are the ones who are there cooking all the meals. And I thought, well, man, that sounds so cool. That sounds like fun. That's, I'll go do that. And and I did, but it was the biggest challenge I ever could have imagined. Um, I literally cried myself to sleep my first day of work, thinking, what have I gotten myself into? It was so unbelievably physical, Zane. So, if you think about, like, as a chef in a restaurant, you cook the same food every single day. You may have a daily special, but more or less, same menu every day for new people coming in,
Mhm.
right? On a movie set, you're feeding the same people every single day. And so the last thing they want is the same menu every day. So every single day we were doing, you know, totally new menu, all of the kind of logistics that go into that, plus all the fake fad diets or real fad diets or food allergies or fake food allergies, you name it. We're all there on top of it. And then adding in the extra layer of that is on location, so the things that you take for granted in a restaurant, like running water, basics, right? None of that is there. So every morning we would start, depending on the shoot, typically 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We would start by loading giant 5-gallon jugs of water onto our trucks, which everything, if you wanted to wash your hands, cook pasta, you name it, required putting the water on the truck at the beginning of the day in order to have it. So, my first day, we were on a movie in Arkansas, and it was in the summer. It was like 100 degrees outside. It was an incredibly long day. I was laying in bed, sunburnt. My legs were cramping, and I just was like, "What have I gotten myself into?" But I ended up loving it. Give it a couple of days into it, a couple of weeks into it, time into it. What I learned was the benefit of that environment was that in a restaurant, as a chef, you don't get a lot of opportunity to interact with your guests and your customers. And on a movie set, you're cooking the food, but then you're there serving it to them. And you get to know these people, and you know their likes and their dislikes, and you fix something special just for them. And it was a great experience, but it was one that was not sustainable. I will say that. It honestly, 2 years in, I was like, get me out of here, and I don't want to ever cook for a living ever again.
Oh, that's really funny, but it does sound like a really unique and fulfilling experience. So you touched on this a little bit already, but did you have any other careers before the one that you currently have?
um, now you mean as a
Yeah.
marketing standpoint? So not really. I mean, I worked first kind of in my path was kind of starting in the kitchen, right? Well, really, my very first job was washing dishes, like so many people, but starting in the kitchen, then kind of into front of house management after working on movies and working in the kitchen when I was like, I don't want to cook anymore. Then from the management side, I started doing marketing and branding within in-house for restaurants. And it just was a transition that kind of led from one thing to the next.
Okay, and did any of those things impact you or kind of influence the way that you do things now?
They all did. I mean, every single step was on top of the next one, right? One of my lessons that I used to say all the time, which I wouldn't want any of my staff to hear this now, but I was like, make all your mistakes with someone else's money, right? When I was working, I was fearless. People would be like, "Hey, do you know how to do this?" Yes, right. I'll figure it out. And that's, I think, the number one thing is to not, when you kind of come to that stop sign, don't just sit there. Look left to right and forge ahead. Like, you've got to just jump in and do it. Leap and
Hmm.
the net will appear, really. But yeah, I mean, there were some really interesting lessons where, so backing up, when I left the movies, I moved back to Charleston, South Carolina. I was like, get me out of this. And I went to work for a friend that I had known down there who was working on a large development. And she was one of these people who was a stickler for the details, right? She was the one who was, hey, she had a very particular way. Like, if you were um, sending a letter or mailing something, this is how you have to fold it so that when they open an envelope and they open it out, they see your logo first, right? Or she was the one who was just kind of a stickler for those sorts of things, of using the right fonts and the right type and formatting and those things. And so when I left there to come back to Nashville to work at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum in it was New Year's Day of 2003, and the same company that I'd worked for on movie sets had a contract to do all the food and beverage in this brand new, back then, multi-million-dollar museum. And I come in day one and I look at the catering menus, and all I could think about was my old boss as I look at that, and I'm like, wait, this there's the word vegetables is misspelled. The word desserts is misspelled. Why does this page have something in bold and italics and underlined? Is it left justified or center justified? All of those details from that last gig applied there. Then the next one on that, I built on top of those skills. So it was really definitely a thing where one led to the next. And ultimately, the number one piece that led to where I am today was a project, same boss when I was working for Tomcats. There was a restaurant here in Nashville. It's called the Loveless Cafe. It was originally opened in 1951, and it was in a bad state of disrepair. It was getting ready to be bulldozed. And he was, saw a newspaper article that it was going to be torn down. He had grown up going there his whole life and said, there's no way, we got to save it. So he went and found financial partners to support the renovation and expansion. And as we were getting ready to get open, um, I hired a graphic designer to design a newspaper ad for me. And it was a 4x4 ad. I explained, I thought, very clearly what I wanted. And what came back was nothing like what I had asked for. And so that was the magic moment where I said, well, I'll just buy the program and do it myself. I'll teach myself how to do this. And started doing graphic design. That was like 2003, 2004. And it just built on top of that.
That's great. So obviously, I think you have a very cool career, but if you had to put it in your own words, in your opinion, what makes your career cool?
The favorite thing that I like about what we do, just, it's not actually, I can't say one favorite thing. I love the fact that every day is different. It's not coming in, punching a clock, you know, doing the same thing over and over. Um, that's certainly a fun thing. I love being able to work with people who are passionate about what they do. So many of our clients come to us and they have an idea that's a passion project that they've been working on for years, or it's inspired by their late grandfather, or it's this, and being able to help bring those visions to life is really great. But I think the most rewarding thing is when we work on a project and then we see it out in the open, right? And we've designed something, created a logo for a brand, or suddenly here it is all over the country, spread around 100 locations. That's really cool to see. It's really fun.
Yeah, I definitely understand the seeing your work out in the open, kind of giving you
Yeah.
that inner, yeah, that feeling. So what does it take to be successful in this field?
Um, I think one of the key things that I think is really important for us, and it goes back to that kind of concept of pushback, of really kind of making sure that you don't take things personally. You have to be open to critique. You have to be open to that sort of feedback. When we sit down with a client, if we're doing a logo presentation and we're working on various ones, and we go through the whole list, my very first question is, tell me what you hate. Because that's so much more telling and so much more insightful often than telling me what you like. Because
Hmm.
figuring out why something doesn't resonate or what's wrong, what moves them one way or another. I think that's really important, is having that sort of, um, it's not a thick skin necessarily, because it's really just about not taking it personal. And then I think too, there's an emotional intelligence that you need to have, where you understand how people behave, how people react, what's the nature of this, and how will people respond to it, and what moves the needle. And a lot of that is, I'm a consumer, right? I'm a total novelty consumer. Like, if I go into the store and there's a new flavor of like Coke, they're doing all their ridiculous like 2023 fake flavors. I'm like, oh, I gotta try that. Oh, I gotta try that. What's this? What's that? New flavor of gum. I'm like, oh, I gotta try it. Uh, what is it that makes me respond to that, and understanding how do I bring that behavior out of someone else? Because the difference between art and design, art is just pretty, right? Design, I want that to create an emotion, and more importantly, an action in someone. It needs to drive sales, it needs to drive engagement. How do we create that sort of action in the person that reads it, sees it, holds it?
Got it, got it. So why is what you do important?
Well, I would say that what we do honestly is not important in the scale of things, right? We're not saving lives. We're not, that's really, I think, key for us. And I tell my team that this is not life and death. This is not, what we're doing is not important in the sense of like a global importance. What I think is important about what we do is that the businesses we work with are also owned and managed by individuals. And what's important is that we're supporting the dreams and goals of others. Uh, that that to me is what's important, is that we're helping kind of feed that fire and that spirit of entrepreneurialism within others.
Okay, got it. Can you take us through a regular day at work? I know you said that every day is different, so there might not be a regular day, but
Yeah, yeah. So I'm always the first one here to the office. I'm very fortunate that my office is less than a mile away from my house, so I've got a commute like that. Uh, but it starts with coffee. All good days start with coffee. Uh, but no, it really does depend day to day. A lot of what it is for us is just there's a balance between the more strategic projects that we're working on, a branding project, a labeling project, a packaging project, and ongoing work for our existing retainer clients, which is much more reactionary, right? And so a lot of it is prioritizing those things of how do we keep these bigger projects moving along on a path to fit those deadlines, and how do we kind of weave in the smaller last minute urgent needs that come through. But we do uh, photography and video. We have a full studio here at the office. We do merchandise for our clients, design and sourcing and warehousing and fulfillment. um, we do websites, so it's really a juggling act of all of those, and there's no way I could do it without a great team of people.
Mhm. Sorry, really quickly, can you explain what a retainer client is?
Yeah, so we work on a billable hours scale, right? So the work we do is billed by the hour, and so if if it's a graphic design, or if we're working on web edits or any of those things, it's the amount of time that we take is times that hourly rate. But there are a lot of clients where it's not just a here's one project every 6 months. They have an ongoing need of multiple projects for months and months and months. And so what we do with those clients is set them up with a discounted rate and a guaranteed number of billable hours each month. So those are a retainer client. It helps us from a business standpoint know that we've got that much money coming in the door no matter what. Um, it helps them uh, pay a reduced rate for our services.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you work in the office, but do you have the availability to work remotely?
I do. And so does my team. We have our art director lives in Brooklyn, um, and we work. Works remotely. That works great. Um, some of the work that we do is best done in house and together from a collaboration standpoint. But I'm also someone who it's really important that I set those boundaries. So company wide, we've got a policy that no one replies to an email outside of office hours, um, which also means don't check your emails outside of office hours. A lot of that is getting an expectation for our clients to not think that we're there for them 24/7. We all have lives. We need to have lives outside of work. But with that, I also don't like to work from home because I like to leave work here. I like to shut the laptop, leave it here. But yes, working remotely, I think, is something that for so many careers is more and more and more important. Virtually everyone in the office has at least one remote day a week.
Mhm. Okay. Do you have flexibility in your work schedule in case, plans change and you need to family emergency or something like that?
Absolutely. That flexibility comes from a great team who does all the real work. Project director of special projects, project coordinators who are working on keeping all the things running, all the gears going.
Okay. And, we talked a lot about work, so how do you use your free time?
So I love to cook, right? It's amazing how much more I enjoy cooking when I don't do it for a living. Um, but I also really enjoy, because I work with restaurants and bars and distilleries. I like seeing those things outside of work, and interacting and just kind of getting inspired. Of course, love to travel, and hang out at my house with my husband and my puppies.
Nice. Um, so is your work is more collaborative, right? You have a team that you interact with and then along with a client. So this is more of a job tailored to an extrovert, would you say?
I think for myself, yes. I think that there are certainly people on our team that may not be as extroverted. Our graphic designers, for example, some of them are much more introverted, which allows them to kind of really dig into their creative brains and kind of apply that. But I think interacting as much as I do with clients, I think being comfortable with that is important.
Okay. But you could be in this field and not necessarily be that much of a people person?
100%.
Okay. So, what's the next step in this field?
Well, you know, for me, I think what I'm enjoying is the growth of where we started when I started this company 8 years ago, um, versus where it's going, and kind of the evolution of that. Where it's going for us is a lot more of kind of the environmental design. So for a restaurant, it's not just creating their logos, building their website, designing their menus. It's how do we bring that brand to life inside of that physical space? How do we create those sort of, you know, moments that kind of inspire and delight a guest, those little Easter eggs that they're going to discover. Um, that's really cool, and really fun to see. But I think for us, it's also about doing the things that computers can't do. Um, how do we, think about AI and where AI is going, and how do we use that as a tool for inspiration for what humans can create for
Mhm.
now, that is.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've given us a lot of valuable information. As we finish up, let's not forget to do the mailbag. So to submit for our mailbag, please email zane@coolcareersandhowyougotthem.com. Fill out our get in touch form on our website, coolcareersandhowyougotthem.com, or DM us on the gram at coolcareersandhowyougotthem. So today's question comes from Sienna, who is a junior in New York. And her question is, what should I do if I think I know what field I want to pursue, but my parents aren't supportive of it and want me to do something else? I mean, that's a tough question. I have no
That is a
clue.
really tough question, Sienna. I feel for you. I know that's a challenge, but I'm going to be kind of blunt. If your parents are going to pay for your school, do it. Go for it. Follow their guidance. But it also really does depend on how adjacent, like how different is your goal from what they want. But because I say that because ultimately, at this stage, going straight from high school into college, into the university, getting that education, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're ever going to do. I'm a perfect example of that. I went to culinary school, and here I am working on brands and projects that are spread not only around the country, around the world. So I don't think that, I think, don't feel like that immediate step is necessarily going to be what you end up having to do for the rest of your life. Um, but I also think too, it's depending on that dynamic. It's always worth having that conversation. Um, I'm a huge believer in communication, uh, but I would say, as simple as this sounds, if they're going to help pay for it, just do it. Suck it up, do it, and then after you get that degree, then go do what you want.
Hmm. It's good advice. I mean, yeah, if the parents are paying,
Right?
yeah, it's.
It's kind of worth it. And again, it's not the that doesn't mean that that's the path you have to follow your whole life.
Mhm,
But I bet that experience, every single step is going to lead to more opportunities.
mhm,
And so, but I would say if you have if what they want is something that ultimately in your core is something that you as a person don't believe in, or could never have passion for, or could never care about, or if it's if it's a huge conflict with your personal values, then you should stand up against that.
mhm,
um, I think that's what I look to a younger generation to do, is to be the ones who are going to say, this isn't right, we're stopping this now. That sort of foundational change, is important. So there's a lot of caveats there, Sienna. Sorry.
All right. If people want to learn more about you or what you do, where can they go?
Well, I started a website. It's that'sfresh.com, which is MMMTHATSFRESH.com. I I'm on Instagram, but I don't really post that much, so I wouldn't follow me. I'm not that interesting. But we're also on the gram at That's Fresh.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we end everything, you've got the ear of many highly ambitious students. Do you have any final advice for them, or possibly an ask you have for them?
Well, I think that the key here is don't stress about feeling like you have to have it all figured out. Uh, Leave yourself open to the opportunities that arise along the way. Um, if I go back to myself, it was that one moment of a $400 newspaper ad that didn't look like what I wanted it to look like that really shifted my entire trajectory into finally landing what I always wanted to do. Um, so, and I was 30 something years old when that happened. Right. So,
Hmm.
I think that's key. Um, and I think too, don't feel like there's an immediacy. The longer it takes, the sweeter it is.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Goldstein. You have a good one.
Thank you. My pleasure.